I see I've been on mute and talking to myself the entire time. So, a big welcome to everyone who's joined us this evening. This is broadcast number 177 that we've done from the SA Jewish Report. So, a big welcome to everyone watching us around the world. We're very excited. Our 176th broadcast was, in fact, a broadcast from the APSA Jewish Achiever Awards. And that's been watched about 40,000 people, 50,000 people around the world. So, we're so excited about that. But we came across a story that we thought we'd bring you this evening, and that's the story of Stan Katz, probably the most famous radio man from the 1980s. Him and John Burks. He and John Burks were really the pioneers of talk radio in South Africa, and we wanted to tell that story and tell it to all of those people who've listened to the radio since the 1980s, since the change in media, and we thought it would be a great, fantastic story to tell. But before we do that, and because we have people watching us all over the world, and I think everyone can chat with everyone. So if you can, please, in the chat box, let us know where you're watching from in the world. But what we'd also like to do is we'd like to share a moment from the APSA Jewish Achiever Awards. Because one of our awards this year, the Rising Star Award, everything was just so special. We thought we'd give you a little glimpse, if you haven't actually seen it, into the Rising Star Award. So have a look at this. So Dylan tells me there's no audio. So let us actually see if we can start that again. We've certainly been having some technical problems this evening. The first thing I'm going to do is to change my name as well. It's booted me off here once or twice this evening. We had some problems getting people onto YouTube. So in case you don't know who I am, I'm telling you my name is Howard Saxton. I'm doing that in the corner. And I'm going to share and make sure that we have some sound and optimization on. These technical difficulties, I tell you.
Ladies and gentlemen, grab a glass of something, because this is the toast of the evening. Here's to the rising stars, the proud, resilient, and unapologetic. The ones who, despite their age, know they stand on the shoulders of South African Jewish giants. And because of this, they can define themselves on their own terms. None of these people conform. They all lead. They stand tall when others shrink, and they build when others destroy. They are the Jewish architects of South Africa's future. They are what makes me optimistic about the future of this community and the future of our country. They don't just belong to this country's story. They are, like many who come before them, its very lifeblood. Without them, there is no question in my mind that South Africa would lose its brilliance. They wear their Jewishness with pride, not as a label, but as a purpose. They carry the legacy of dreamers and builders and will carve paths for generations to come. We dedicate this award to my parents, Bernice and Louis Ichikowitz, rising stars of their time. They, together with their contemporaries, taught us that being Jewish isn't just an identity. It's about action, it's about purpose, It's about pride. And they continue to live this belief and reinforce it to us every single day. And to today's rising stars who refuse to be silenced, who rise above propaganda, who fight for a future of dignity and pride, the Jewish story is one of resilience, one of courage, one of innovation. It's an unshakable belief in building what others say cannot be built. You can't ignore them. You can't stop them. They are the light that guides us and our whole community forward. Here's to the leaders, the builders, the unapologetically Jewish. Together, we rise higher and we shine brighter. We are blessed to be Jewish. We are privileged to be African and to be able to call South Africa our home. And with that, the winner is Josh Weinberg.
So I'm going to stop it there, but I am going to tell you that we'll show the rest later. So if you missed it, please feel free to join us a little later, and we're going to show you just this remarkable insight from this young 21-year-old winner who won the Jewish Achiever Award, Rising Star Award. And it's such an inspiring story. So please let us know where you're watching from in the world. We really want to hear from you, and we really want to see you. And we hope, in fact, that Stan Katz has joined us. Stan, I can't see you. So let's hope you're around and you're going to be joining us for our webinar. You were here a few minutes ago, but we've been having such ridiculous this evening, such ridiculous technical problems. We had difficulty getting live on Zoom this evening. We had difficulty, I got booted off Zoom, then we had difficulty getting onto YouTube this evening as well. But we think we have a remarkable story to tell, and we hope that Stan Katz will be joining us in a moment to share that story with us. So Stan, if you're there, turn on your camera, turn on your audio, and let's see where you are. If not, I'm going to go on to mute and I'm going to call you and try to track you down. So I'm going on mute for a second, and let me try to track down Stan. Okay, I think we may have found Stan Katz. Stan, is your video and audio on? Can you see yourself on the screen? Because I can't see you on the screen. No, still can't see you on the screen. I'm just going to ask everyone busy watching us just to have a few moments patience with us, please, as we try to get Stan onto the screen. Please tell us in the meantime where you're busy watching us from, and we'll try get with you shortly. But can you see me on the screen? Okay, then you're not on the wrong thing. Please. Guys, we'll join you in one moment. We're just trying to get Stan on the line. Sorry, we've been having a few technical difficulties, but we'll be with you in a second. Sorry, we're just busy sorting out a technical difficulty. We should only be 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll be with you again.
Okay, I can't see you yet. Stan.
There I am.
There you are.
Okay. Are we in business?
Stan Katz, it's been a disastrous evening so far, but let's make it much better. You told
I'm
me that
sorry.
you're an analog man in the digital age. I think you may have proved that this evening.
Haven't I always told you that, Howie? I'm a technophobe.
Well, welcome. We've got people watching us around the world. Fantastic
Oh.
to see your face. So
Thank
many
you.
people know that voice.
Okay.
So please tell us where you're watching around the world, and we'd love to greet everyone this evening and start telling a remarkable story. Stan, many people still know you, but that's hard to believe. When last were you on radio?
I was on radio. Well, the Morning Zoo was in 1987, which would be 37 years ago. I'm currently on air on Mix FM on a Saturday afternoon, but people remember me, I assume, from the Morning Zoo, which 37 years ago, I was a young callow fellow, just out of short pants.
So Stan, let's start in the beginning. You're from Mafeking.
Yeah,
It's changed its name so many times.
Let me tell you the story, Howie. I was born at a very young age in a place called Mafeking. Now, Mafeking, you may or may not know, has changed its name several times. From Mafeking, when I was born there, to Mafeking, and now it's Mahikeng. Now, I suspect that all these name changes were designed so that I wouldn't find my way back. Well, they needn't have worried about that, Howie, because I'm a 60 thrills a minute kind of guy, and Mafeking was established for people who are fed up with excitement. It's basically why fun goes to die.
It's hardly a thriving metropolis. I mean, did they even have a traffic light?
It was a bit backward. I'll tell you how backward. The headlines came out on the T-shirt before they hit the newspapers. And Mafeking was a boring town, Howie. The buses that go through Mafeking don't have any windows. There's a sign on the entrance to Mafeking saying, "Welcome to Mafeking." Same sign on the way out. I mean, where do you see hitchhikers with signs saying anywhere?
So did it have a traffic light in Mafeking?
They were when I left, they were just getting their first traffic light. They hadn't got it, but they'd chosen the colors.
So as a young kid in Mafeking, you're far away from the action. You're clearly kind of a high energy individual. What do you actually do to keep busy?
Howie, I got lost in radio, in theater of the mind. I would listen to all the serials at night when everybody went to sleep. I would have my transistor radio under the pillow and listening. I was also into music in a big way. And you could hear the same music anybody was hearing just about anywhere else, except on radio in South Africa. And I discovered, but this was after I'd left Mafeking, I discovered a radio station called Swazi Radio, which was owned by the Kirschers. That was the first radio station I worked at, and the first radio station I got fired from. I can tell you the story.
Let's actually talk, before we get on to that, let's actually talk about this issue of radio, because in South Africa at that point in time, the SABC owned everything. Radio was controlled by government.
SABC was the only game in town, and no one could get a license to broadcast because they had the monopoly. And it was the apartheid government's propaganda mouthpiece. So obviously they weren't going to let anyone else on the scene, because someone might land up telling the truth, which down the road on 702, we did land up telling the truth. But that is a story down the line. Ask me a question.
Well, I know for every question I'll ask you, you'll have at least two answers. But the Kirschers had found a loophole. The Kirschers who are really
found a loophole. The first loophole the Kirschers found was Swazi Radio. Now, Swazi Radio had its studios and offices in Johannesburg, and the transmitter was in Swaziland, now known as Eswatini. And we used to record everything in Joburg and fly it down on tape to the transmitter, where it was then broadcast back into South Africa. Unfortunately, we had technical problems with the transmitter, and the station, because of those technical issues, never really took off.
But Stan, I want to talk. There's a lot of story before we even get there, because now you're a kid in Mafeking, you're
Yes.
obsessed with radio,
Yes.
you're a musician, you're a guitarist. What do you want to do with your life?
Well, I wanted to be a lead guitarist in a rock band. That was my big dream.
What do
parents said-
Jewish parents think about that?
Well, my parents said, get an education so you'll always have something to fall back on. So for a time, I considered becoming a doctor. The only problem is I faint at the sight of money. So I went to university, where I majored in drug abuse. And to everyone's surprise, I came away with a BCom from Wits. And it's amazing how life works, how things fall into place when you least expect them. So at this stage, I have left Mafeking. I've got my degree from Wits, and I'm driving my car one night listening to Swazi radio, and I have an epiphany. I think I would like to become a radio personality. Now, normally one has an epiphany or a hunch, and your first inclination is to dismiss it, which I did. I thought there's no reason I could succeed at something like this. But I'd read a book and listened to tapes about a book called Think and Grow Rich, which says anything the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. So I thought, well, what the hell? I'm going to give it a go. And I managed to get an interview with the management at Swazi Radio. And I wandered in there to the meeting, to the interview, and bucolic and open-mouthed, I poured forth the torrent of my inspiration and announced that I wanted to be a disc jockey. Well, they told me, we're not looking for disc jockeys. What do you know about programming? To which I replied, if you tell me what programming is, I'll tell you what I know about it. In other words, I didn't have a clue. And the meeting was over. They said, thanks for coming to see us. And I had to do something. I had to think fast. So as I got to the door, I turned around. I said, I got a BCom from Wits. So they hired me as the administrative assistant to the company secretary. I was the office boy. It wasn't what I had in mind, but I had gained entry into an industry that is largely a closed shop, not easy to get into, but I was in. And so began my climb up the ranks. I volunteered for everything. I never took no for an answer. I never expected my ideas to be taken seriously, and I never expected thanks. But I learned the business from the ground up. I learned more about Swazi Radio than just about anyone, because I had my own set of keys. I would come back at night and practice and try and submit audition tapes to get a gig on the air.
So just explain to us how this worked. The studio's in Johannesburg.
Right.
You pre-record all the radio shows, and then
Correct.
you fly them into Swaziland to be broadcast out of Swaziland.
Correct. And it was real bush radio. It was pirate radio.
But the Kirschers had found an opportunity. They could
Kirschers-
broadcast into South Africa without SABC and government control.
Well, Swaziland played a big part in the life of the Kirschers. So they had found a loophole. And if it wasn't for the bad transmission issues, it would have been a great success. But it wasn't to be. And then a number of years later, when the Bophuthatswana, the homeland of Bophuthatswana was established, Izzy Kirsch, and he is the unsung hero of this interview. Izzy deserves all the accolades. He had the foresight and the vision to approach the Bophuthatswana government for a license to broadcast from Bophuthatswana into South Africa. And that became 702. And
so we're getting ahead in the story, though.
I'm sorry, I'm it's like taking a sip from a fire hydrant. I know. Let me simmer down, and you ask me questions.
You simmer down because
straight answer.
While you're at Swazi Radio, you meet someone called Burks.
Yes. Okay.
Tell us about this character.
Okay. Now, John Burks was a radio hero of mine from when I was a boy. He was the best thing I'd ever heard on radio. I think he was with LM Radio at the time. So after I'd joined Swazi Radio, Burks was brought on board as the program manager, and I asked for a transfer from admin to programming, and I started working with John. And it was just the most wonderful thing. I thought I died and gone to heaven. I was working with my hero. And because of my love and knowledge of music, John appointed me music manager. And every Sunday we would gather, John and I, and we would choose the playlist for the coming week. And I was having the time of my life. And then, out of the blue, they hire a guy called Groover Wayne. Am I getting ahead of myself? I think
tell us about Groover Wayne.
So Groover Wayne was Australian. He was actually an ex-South Africa who'd been in Australia for many years. I am the music manager at this point. Remember? They hire Groover Wayne as the music manager. Now, one cotton picking, corn chucking, chicken plucking minute, I'm the music manager. So my first inclination, Howie, was to teach them a lesson and resign. And then my ego calmed down. And this was one of the first lessons I had. Your ego is not your amigo. For people who don't speak Spanish, your ego is not your friend. So it occurred to me that if I stay put and bide my time, I will not only know everything I know about radio, but I would know everything that Groover Wayne knows about radio. And so I was happy to accept the demotion to assistant music manager. As it happened, Groover Wayne had a blowtorch personality. He was the kind of guy who would brighten up a whole room when he walks out. So he and Burks clashed mightily, and the Groover was fired. And I was back in my old job as program manager, music manager, working happily with Burks in his capacity as program manager. But there was another personality clash coming down the pike. Burks could not see eye to eye with the station manager. I won't mention a guy, let's call him Bill, because that was his real name. I like to say, I don't want to mention Bill Otto's name because I don't want to get him involved. Anyway,
Bill Otto's name will definitely not be mentioned in tonight's show.
Thank you very much. And Burks and he didn't see eye to eye. First of all, Burks had been in radio for a long, long time. Bill had been hired because he was a Springbok water polo player, and they figured that with his Springbok fame, he would be able to open doors and bring in business. But what he knew about radio was precious little. In fact, what he knew about radio would have filled a warehouse.
What he didn't know or what he knew?
What he didn't know about radio would fill a warehouse. He didn't know whether it was New York or New Year. So Burks huffed off, which left me and Bill. And so I didn't think Bill knew what he was doing, and I took it upon myself to compile a report on his shortcomings and to suggest in so many words why I would be a good replacement for him. And I handed my report to the Kirschers, who did the only right thing and handed the report to Bill, who called me in to his office and said, I believe you're not happy with the way I'm running the station. To which I replied, that's right, Bill, and I plan to resign. I could see the axe coming. What was I going to say? I said, and when do you plan to do this? I said, at the end of the month. And Bill said, there's no need to wait. You can leave now. In those days, there was no CCMA. There was no paper trail. You could fire someone on the spot. I was unceremoniously relieved of my duties. Anyway, I took some time to lick my wounds and regroup. And because I had time on my hands, I decided to stage a rock festival at Ellis Park, not to be confused with a concert in the park, which happened in 1985. This was 1976. It was the old Ellis Park, if you can recall that, with the tennis courts and all of that. I had 8 of the country's top bands, including Rabbit, as the headline act.
So if I can stop for a second, because at Jewish Achiever Awards 2 weeks ago, we in fact gave an honorary award, a special and extraordinary award to Trevor Rabin, who was one of the founders of Rabbit, who obviously then went on to work with Bob Dylan and composed for Michael Jackson, became the lead singer and guitarist for Yes, and then has gone on to be one of the greatest celebrities in Hollywood, scoring up to about 50 movies in Hollywood.
And he has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice.
In fact, the only South African in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yes, and I was at a lunch where Neil Cloud was. Neil was the drummer. And Neil said they're talking about a reunion tour, including Foreigner and Yes. I hope this happens. I don't know when. These things get talked about for a long time. I hope it does materialize. So this is 1976. After my rock festival, I landed up managing a band called the Band of Gypsies. Some of our viewers would remember the Band of Gypsies. You'd probably
they were famous in the 1960s, weren't they?
They were famous in the 60s. And they led a rock and roll lifestyle of note. They had the ashes and the scars to prove it. And it became my ambition to make the Band of Gypsies great again. And then, well, you know, Trump has used that as his slogan. But I had it long before then. I wanted to make the Band of Gypsies great again, but their reputation preceded them. I could not get them a gig. One club I went to, I approached to hire them. I said, Band of Gypsies. The guy said, that's the father and the 3 boys. I said, yep, that's right. He said, I wouldn't hire them if they were the last band on earth. My mouth dropped open. I said, why? He said, well, one night they came on barking like dogs, which everyone thought was quite funny, until one of them leapt off the stage and bit someone in the audience, resulting in a mass exodus from the club. I went to see them. I said, listen, what have you guys got up to? I didn't have a comeback. I said, tell me all the crap that you've got up to, like biting people. So Benny, the drummer, says to me, well, it couldn't have been me because I don't have any teeth, which was true. Benny didn't have any teeth. Henry, the father of the boys and the bass player, said, I couldn't remember the incident because, as he put it, the years flash by, and don't they just? And then Peter came in. He's the lead guitarist and the leader of the band. Peter chimes in and says, and we didn't start the fire at the Ambassador Hotel. I hadn't even alluded to this. I was totally unaware that there had been a fire at the Ambassador Hotel. I didn't know what to do. So what I did notice was they could play Jimi Hendrix covers like nobody I had ever heard. So I decided to stage a tribute to Jimi Hendrix at the Market Theatre. It was a roaring success, standing room only, night after night. And the lesson I learned there was about pivoting. If your plan or your strategy on the way to achieving a goal doesn't pan out, it's time to pivot to another strategy, another course of action, which is what I did, and it was a huge success. But I couldn't get them. It was all I could squeeze out of them was the tribute to Jimi Hendrix, and I thought I'd give it one more shot. I phoned a club in downtown Joburg called Plum Crazy to try and place them, but they weren't looking for a band. They knew me from Swazi Radio, offered me a job as a disco jock. I'm not keen on disco music, but it was a job. And it's strange how life works. I met a woman at the club who was to become my wife. So all was not lost, or should I say my first wife.
Your first of potentially many wives.
Not many, no, not potentially many.
So Stan, like that kind of runs out. You're no longer on radio. You don't have a band to manage. What do you do with your life?
Okay, I wanted to be close to radio, so I decided to get into advertising. I got a job at J. Walter Thompson, or JWT as it's known, as a copywriter. I also was approached by the SABC, funnily enough. Radio 5 offered me 2 jobs, and the English service, now SAFM, offered me 2 slots, which I accepted. I hated every minute of it. It was so corporate. We had to wear red blazers with a Radio 5 badge emblazoned on the pocket. Howie, I would sit in those programming meetings and think to myself, I'm being punished for something I did in a past life, some evil deed that I am now having to pay off bad karma for. And but I did it until another opportunity arose. And that was in 1977, I'd met a guy I'd attended a radio convention in Toronto, where I met one of America's top program directors, Paul Ward. I hit it off immediately. Paul knew of my love for radio. He was the vice president of Wolfman Jack company. Audio
Explain to us who Wolfman Jack is.
I beg your pardon? Wolfman Jack was a legend. He was one of the most popular, well-known radio and TV personalities on radio and television in the United States. He was syndicating his radio programs around the world and of course in America. And Paul knew of my love for radio, and he said, come to LA. I prefer to call it Hollywood because we were right in the center of Hollywood, on the corner of Hollywood and Vine. He said, come for an interview with a Wolfman with a view to working for audio stimulation. So before I left for LA, I managed to place the Wolfman Jack's show on Capital Radio, which was
tell us that story. And also, just for those people who don't remember, Capital Radio was another independent radio station that had been set up in the first independent homeland of Transkei, which was kind of just south of KwaZulu-Natal.
Correct. Sadly, and that was a good station. They had recruited their disc jockeys from the UK, from Capital Radio in the UK.
Kevin Savage.
Kevin Savage. I can't remember all the names.
Emery.
Who?
Emery.
Rick Emery, yes. I forget his first name. It was a long time ago. They were ahead of 702 in setting up a pirate radio station, but they also had a 500,000 watt medium wave transmitter. That is so powerful. If cows get in the way of the signal, it fries them. It just kills all the grass around the transmitter. They had the same problem, technical difficulties with their transmission, and capital never happened, which was very sad. When I came back from the States, they approached me to become the program manager, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
So you go to Capital Radio, you haven't gone yet to Hollywood, and what happens there?
I hadn't gone yet to Hollywood. I went to see them with a demo of the Wolfman Jack show. I managed to place it on the station for $18,000 up front for a year. When I arrived for my interview at Audio Stimulation with the Wolfman and his vice presidents, etc., all I did was slide the check across the desk to the Wolfman. He picked it up and looked at it. It was a check for $18,000. This was 1979. Do you think I got the job?
Damn straight.
Damn straight I got the job. Before I had even been employed, I brought in $18,000 worth of business. And $18,000 in those days was a considerable amount of money. It's still not chump change. So where are we?
So you're in Hollywood, you're working for Wolfman Jack?
Yes. I was there for a couple of years, and because of immigration issues, I had to come back to South Africa. 702 was just getting started. This was 1980. 702.
Well, you yourself decided you could try get a radio station in the newly independent Republic of Botswana.
Yes, it had occurred to me, and they gave me a hearing without
you
telling
went to go
me.
See you went to go see Lucas Mangope himself, the
did
president of a country recognized only by the South African government.
Exactly, and thereby hangs a tale, but we'll get into that. They listened intently and thanked me for coming to see them, and I thought that was quite a good meeting. What they hadn't told me was that they had already granted a license to a consortium consisting of Kirsch Industries, the 4 newspaper groups, and the Botswana government. So if you go and beat them, join them. I presented.
So the Kirschers had pipped you to it. They were the masters of radio.
The what?
They were the masters of radio.
The masters of radio, and they had experience. And Sol Kersner was part of the consortium. And Sol, of course, was well established. He was entrenched in Botswana. Sun City, after all, was their biggest industry. So I went to see Swazi Radio, and how's this?
Or 702. 702 you go to.
Sorry, 702. Swazi Radio was before. I went to 702. The guy who'd fired me from Swazi Radio, Bill, I won't mention names because I don't want to involve Bellotto. So he wasn't that keen to hire me, as you can imagine. But Bill tried to pull the same thing that I did, which was oust the managing director and taking over, except the managing director was Izzy Kirsch, a major shareholder in the company. So he was ousted unceremoniously. And I got a job doing Sunday nights after 10 o'clock, after Casey Kasem's American Top 40, which some of our viewers might remember. 10 o'clock on a Sunday night is also known as the graveyard shift. And but I managed to pull quite a big audience. And I was pretty soon doing an afternoon drive show on 702 called the Stan Katz Good Time Lowdown Rock and Roll Radio Show.
So Stan, did this reunite you back with John Burks as well?
John came in John, yes, it did reunite me, but John was not my boss anymore. John came in as the morning breakfast show host. It did phenomenally well. I just want to tell you that 702 was a success from day one. It was such a relief from the dry SABC. And a big part of our marketing strategy was because of Izzy Kirsch's philosophy that one would do well by doing good. And he set up, it was under him that they set up the crisis center in Ilbrow, the helpline. I translated that as becoming the hub of the 702 land community. By the way, it was up in that point, it was called the Pretoria Witwatersrand Triangle, or the PWV. I changed the name to 702 land. I believe 702 repaid its investors within 18 months. And 1985, I joined in 1980 part-time. In 1985, because of my American experience, I knew more about radio than a lot of people on the station, and they appointed me sales and marketing director. There was no job description, there were no KPAs or KPIs or whatever it was. I interpreted as my job is to squeeze the juice. My job was to position the radio station as the hub of the 702 land community and to bring in as much revenue as possible. We had an advertising campaign that we dominated outdoor, which is billboards, with billboards saying, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. That was when we became a talk station. So by 1987, because of the success I'd had as the sales and marketing director, I was appointed managing director of 702. Now, listen to this for a schizophrenic situation. I was the managing director of 702, and I was hosting the Morning Zoo, which was the most popular program on the station. It was a bizarre situation. I was virtually the class clown, because I was a clown on the Morning Zoo, and I was the managing director of the station. It was like being the class clown and the school principal rolled into one. And
tell us a little about what would happen on air. Tell us the dynamics. What was it like? What was it like being on the Morning Zoo? You just
I'll tell you what it was like. I'll tell you exactly what it was like. It gave me one more good reason for dying in my sleep. And I'll tell you why. I was doing 2 full-time jobs, Howie. I was on air from 6 in the morning till 9. At 9 o'clock, I would take over as managing director and work for the rest of the day. So I just remember being perpetually tired, and it was becoming difficult to do it without some chemical support. I would need an upper to get going in the morning, and I would need a downer at night so I could get some sleep. I was working 16, 18 hours a day and I loved it, but I was exhausted. And where am I now? Okay, I'm the managing director. Burks, I had taken a sabbatical because he was burning out. When I burned out, nobody gave me a sabbatical. I always resented that. I thought, geez, I could do what I used to do. And by the way, I was starting to use recreational substances, and I was drinking quite heavily. What I would do periodically was take myself off to the health hydro for a week or two, dry out, come back refreshed, and start the cycle all over again.
but drugs was nothing new. When we first met, one of the comments you said, I went to university and I majored in drug
Majored in drug
abuse.
abuse. No, I mean, everybody I knew was at least smoking weed. Um, my friends and I had a very simple philosophy. We believed the system would collapse under its own weight. The best thing we could do was remain high in the meantime, which we proceeded to do. And as I said, to everyone's surprise, I came away with BCom from Wits.
So, so you're now managing director of the station, but
Yes,
it's a highlight because suddenly you're voted the sexiest man in South Africa, and then you
yes,
voted the most stylish man in South Africa.
most
You're on the
elegant.
cover of every magazine. You're living the high life.
Yes, and um, I was partying like there was no tomorrow. I even had a limo built. By the way, what I wanted to do was bring a touch of glamour, which I picked up in the state in Hollywood. That was where glamour was. I also learned, Howie, that show business, of which music radio is a part, is 10% show and 90% business. The 10% show was the part that the audience was exposed to, the tip of the iceberg. But the hard work, which was not glamorous, was beneath, was the bottom end of the iceberg. So the limousine, which I encouraged the management and the personalities to use if they were going to a function or anything, to see the big limo with smoke glass windows pulling up. I had a fridge installed in it that held a bottle of champagne. We had champagne flutes, crystal decanters, tumblers, and we also had one of the first phones in the car phones in the country. So, 1983, I am voted South Africa's sexiest man. And now I hasten to add, it was not a contest I had entered. I was voted that by the readers of a women's magazine. I spent a lot of time trying to break out from that title, to rid myself of that title. But, and this you must know as well, fame is an aphrodisiac. And so the floodgates of plenty opened and I dived in head first. So we worked hard and we played hard. And my motto was, if it ain't fun, it ain't happening. But I don't think it was a great achievement being voted that. And I don't think it was a great achievement being voted South Africa's most elegant man. Those are constructs of the media. They find someone who's high profile to hang a campaign on. And that's what they did with me. And I thought, what the hell? I'll make the most of it. But the part that I'm most proud of is, as I said, when 702 started, we were, if you wanted to get an ad on 702, you had to send in an application form. And if some time became available, you would be granted some airtime.
So you made clients apply to you for the right to advertise on the station.
Correct.
How?
Because the fish were jumping in the boat, Howie. Our advertising was ostensibly targeted at the audience, but the industry, the advertising industry, was taken by this. They used to listen. The ad industry were amongst our biggest listeners. So I said to the sales team, there were 4 people whose job was to take off the faxes every day and see who they were going to grant airtime to. I said to them, guys, the fish are jumping in the boat. It's not going to last forever. And I said about building a sales team, which became known as Katz's Killers. I had learned in the States that it's a cutthroat competitive business. People fight for every buck they can for advertising. And so I would interview people for the sales job. They would come in and I'd say, "You think you can sell?" They say, "Yes." I'd say, "Sell me this pen." And then I would see how they go about doing that. I see Jordan Belfort uses that line now as well. I used it back in the 80s. I also say, "Would you walk on dead bodies to get what you want?" Some people would be aghast. They'd say, "Are you mad?" No. Others would say, "Yes, damn straight." They got hired immediately, and I trained them to within an inch of their lives. And so we were able to segue from where the fish were jumping in the boat to where we were fishing where the fish were biting. And
Stan, at this point in time, 702 is still a music radio station.
correct.
And it's broadcasting on medium wave, so the quality of the music is not great.
Quality wasn't bad, except the high-felt storms at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The thunderstorms would come on and the reception was terrible. But what made us go talk was our main competitor was Radio 5. They were also on AM, and we were kicking their ass.
AM is medium wave, correct?
Medium wave. They were on medium wave, we were on medium wave. They were national, we were regional. And when Springbok Radio closed down, they handed over their network of FM transmitters to Radio 5, which became 5FM. As a music station, we could not compete with an FM station as we were on medium wave.
And the quality would be much better on FM.
The clarity, absolutely. Whereas with talk radio, you don't need the same type of clarity. We had also been observing what stations in the States were doing with FM and AM. AM stations were becoming talk stations or sports stations or news talk stations. We knew we had to do something, and we knew we had to be competitive within the entire arena, not just Radio 5. Rena Broomberg, who was my sidekick and right-hand person, and we worked really closely together. John Burks, Rena, and myself would sit together night after night over bottles of J&B whiskey and strategize what we could do. And I asked the question, what can't the SABC do and what won't they do? And the answer was simple. The SABC was the propaganda mouthpiece of the apartheid government. They could not tell the truth. They were spinning the news to make them appear the heroes. So we took the decision, all we have to do is tell the truth. And so we became Talk Radio 702. And
what did your owners and shareholders think of this? This is an enormously risky thing to do.
I think they understood that we had to do something, that we could not. Look, Izzy was brought into this right from the start. Izzy knew the strategy. It was up to Izzy to persuade the shareholders in case there was if there was any pushback, but there wasn't any pushback. I wondered at times whether we'd made the right decision. But what we also did was in positioning, it's creating a position for yourself in a new category. We changed the target market. Everybody at that time, all the media, magazines, radio stations, etc., were targeting 16 to 34 demographic. We said, and we were aware of the baby boomers, those people born between 1946 and 1964. We said the people who were 16 to 34 are now 25 to 49. These are an older, more established. These were the role models, the decision makers, and those are the people we were targeting. our slogan became, don't count the people you reach the people who count. And the people who counted were the people who, it was the quality of the audience, people who could afford the products and services of the advertisers. And so there was no direct competition with a 16 to 34-year-old audience. So we owned 25 to 49. Subsequently, everyone jumped on that bandwagon. What Izzy had done was change the face of radio in South Africa forever. And I had a blank canvas to operate on. So we spent money on advertising. I had an unlimited budget and I exceeded it. But we squeezed the juice. We brought in the money. 702's cash flows and highly rated paper was what formed the foundation for Prime Media. 702.
So in fact, William Kirsch told me a story earlier today that you told him you would make 70 million rand in profit. This is sometime in the 1980s. And he said, if you do that, I will kiss your backside.
Indeed, he did.
And indeed he did. He told me you were wearing red underwear at the time.
Was I? I don't remember. He's got a very good memory. I do have a photograph. Willie went up in my regard. I'd always held him in high regard, but he was a sport. We took a bet. He lost. He delivered. He said to me, kind of offhand, how much profit you going to make this year? And I said, 70 million. He said, if you make 70 million, I'll kiss your ass. And I did, and he did. So kudos to Willie for being a true sport.
But Stan, I want to talk about being a DJ on a radio station is one thing, but the skill set that you actually need to do talk radio is completely different. Correct. How do you readjust? Who are the new characters who come on board? Who become the superstars of talk radio?
Okay, we did it gradually at first. Burks was doing music, and what we did was for a couple of hours of his show, 1 hour a day, he would do talk. I came off air, and I'll tell you what happened there. I was burning out. I was, as I say, running the morning zoo and running the station. The joke was Stan manages 702 and Rena manages Stan. And as I said, I was perpetually tired. I had to make a decision, Stan the man or Stan the manager. And I was attracted to the business end of things. You know, the 10% show, 90% business. I was doing 100%, 90% show and the 10% show. I had to take a decision.
Because people also don't realize being on air for an hour takes a lot of preparation.
It's the minimum is an hour of prep for every hour on air. I did more than an hour of prep for every hour on air. So I was running the station, doing the morning zoo, and spending 4 or 5 hours prepping the show each day. No wonder I was tired. So something had to give. I decided to focus on the business end of things, which I really liked. I like being on air, but I enjoyed the business end of things. And I was working with some really smart people. We had guys like Chris Gibbons, David Williams, David O'Sullivan, John Robbie. And there's a great story about John Robbie. John was doing mornings. He was the sports coach on the morning show. David Williams was doing 9 to 12 at night, and he went on holiday. John Robbie asked if he could stand in for David Blood. He said, okay, stand in. He did such a good job. When David came back, he didn't have a job. Moral of the story is, if you're in radio, don't take a holiday.
So in fact, I had lunch with John Robbie a few weeks ago, and
Yes.
he told me the story that the day Mandela was released, he decided he wanted Mandela on his show. Not
Yes.
knowing what to do, they drive into Soweto to try find Mandela. They can't find Mandela. They then go to to Shell House, the ANC headquarters. Can't find Mandela, but the person they do find wandering around is Joe Slovo.
Yes.
And they say, well, Joe, can you help us with Mandela? And he says, no, but I'll come on radio. And that night they drag Joe Slovo, who is this banned communist who's recently returned to South Africa. They put him on radio. And as soon as he's finished, he says, I want a whiskey. And there's only one place in the building that there would be a whiskey. And that was in your office behind a locked door. And so Joe Slovo and John Robbie smashed down the door in order to get at your whiskey stash.
Yes. Well, there were extenuating circumstances, so he didn't get into trouble.
But so did it pose any threat? You were now threatening the government because you had this platform to speak the truth to the people of South Africa. People of every race, of every ethnicity, of every political persuasion suddenly has a platform which they've never had before, and South Africa is going to change forever because of this. Was there any threat to you ever?
There were enormous threats. John Robbie and I were on a hit list, the same hit list that Pastor Haynes was on, and he was taken out. So John and I had bodyguards for a period of time. There were bomb scares. We had to, on numerous occasions, vacate the building because there'd been a bomb scare. And interestingly enough, a lot of the DJs would be flushing their cigarettes down the toilet. But that's another story. But they tried to curb us. Izzy was constantly being called to account. And they tried to stop us from, first of all, doing community service announcements, that type of thing. And that was at the foundation of our marketing strategy, was to become the hub of the 702 land community. Then what Izzy arranged with them was that before we broadcast the news, we would send it to them to check. So every day we would send thousands of faxes to Pretoria. So many faxes it would take a room full of people a month to go through a day's worth of newscasts. So there was nothing they could do. They couldn't close us down because they'd be seen to be interfering in a sovereign state, which, granted, was only recognized by the South African government, but they couldn't close us down. If they could have, they would have. But we also saw the writing on the wall. We knew that apartheid was unsustainable. It was on the way out. And we took advantage. We were, I don't mind saying, opportunistic in that regard. Now, we were pro-democracy and anti-racist. And that put us on the same side as the ANC. We were not ANC supporters. We were there to call power, to speak truth to power. I would get Cyril Ramaphosa phoning me just about every second day. Why are you picking on the ANC? And we would say, Cyril, we're not picking on the ANC. We are picking on the government because when you guys step out of line, our job as the fourth estate is to call you to account. So there were a lot of people who weren't very happy with us, but we were doing really well.
It couldn't have happened without the Kirschers who stood firm.
No, those are the unsung heroes. And Izzy was kept a low profile. I was the spokesman. And look, you build a brand with PR, you defend it with advertising. I knew that. My background was sales, marketing, advertising, and media. And I cultivated the press. We had a great relationship with the press. And this was at a time when newspapers would appear with columns blanked out because they'd been censored by the government. With radio, it was easy. We could do what we were going to do and then ask for forgiveness.
When all of this, Stan, there's an enormous toll that you start paying. It's a life of rock and roll, drugs, am I allowed to say a bit of debauchery thrown in, some depression. Tell us about your life at this point.
Well, we worked hard and we played hard. I worked incredibly hard, but I didn't go. when I was getting up at 5 in the morning to be on air at 6, I wasn't going to bed at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I was partying until the early hours of the morning, popping a pill and then going on air. And then we were making so much money. There was champagne, there was women, champagne, and cocaine. And it became a problem for me. One afternoon, a Saturday afternoon, I was called to the station for a meeting. Little did I know it was an intervention. My bosses were worried that I had a cocaine problem. And by the way, cocaine is God's way of telling you you're making too much money. And Izzy offered to send me to rehab, which I readily accepted. I no longer wanted the cheese. I just wanted to get out of the trap. And I was grateful for that opportunity. That was 1997, 27 years ago. Never looked back. I never went near cocaine again after that. But for a while, it was rough. Because of my lifestyle, I needed some kind of chemical support just to keep going. I wasn't taking it just to party. I was taking it so that I could get up in the morning and shave and get on with the day and run the station and be on air. So I learned a lot. First of all, when it came to leadership, I was woefully unqualified. I used to rave and rant and throw tantrums, and my most popular saying was, "It's not effort, it's results that count." I still cringe when I think about that, because effort, when it's focused and directed at achieving a predetermined goal, does count. And I also learned that anger puts the focus on the anger, not on solving the problem. I learned a lot from Izzy, who is a mensch of note. He taught me that you don't have to be aggressive to be effective. I learned that from him. Izzy was one of my mentors. I've had a few over the years. Izzy, I count amongst the top. A remarkable human being. I have nothing but great affection for him.
So tell us also about Rena Bromberg, because Rena, you said, used to come behind you and just clean up the debris that came in your wake.
I would go in there and rip people apart. Rena would go in and calm them down. Rena and I worked very closely together. In fact, I used to say to the staff, Stan and Rena is not one word, but we did everything together. Izzy had, as chairman, he had withdrawn from the day-to-day, so Rena and I were running with that. And I joke that Rena used to walk behind me with a big broom to clear away the wreckage I left in my wake. Also, a remarkable human being, soft-spoken, but with a core of iron, a core of steel, and my confidant. Keep saying what we achieved was not the heroic efforts of one person. We had a hell of a team. The core team was Izzy, me, Rena, and John Burks. And that was the core team that set the tone and the strategy going forward.
So I want to talk about strategy, because there became an opportunity. The SABC started selling off radio stations.
Yes.
Tell us about what happened then.
Okay, so the SABC started selling off their regional stations, one of which was Highveld Stereo, now called 94.7. It was a bidding war. We bid, I think it was 317 million rand I had told Willie, we need to own Johannesburg. We had 702. If we could get Highveld, we would own Johannesburg. We paid 117 million, which was 190 million more than the next bid. So important was the station to Willie, he was prepared to pay a strategic premium. It was the best investment Prime Media ever made. It just pumped money.
And so the radio it had changed from one radio station to now a broadcasting unit. You are now Prime Media Broadcasting.
And I was the CEO of Prime Media Broadcasting. We established Cape Talk, which was an AM station in the Cape, as the sister station of 702. Never did as well as 702, but it still punches above its weight. And then afterwards, after I had left, they bought KFM as well. So there was KFM, Highveld, Cape Talk, and 702. And
so William had in fact created a media empire within the
Correct.
Prime Media group.
Correct.
So Stan, I want to go back to addiction for a second, because you sent me something to read, and bizarrely I was doom scrolling through Instagram this morning, and a clip came up and I read it, and then a little later on in the day I read the identical clip from you, and it's from Rabbi Taub. I don't know if you have
Rabbi
it there.
Shais Taub. I just want to see if I can find it. He said, first of all, he is a rabbi. When I was in recovery and getting over my addictions and alcoholism and that, I came across that Rabbi Shais Taub. He has written numerous books on addiction and spirituality. He's also in big demand as a speaker in the United States. I want to see if I can find, because this changed my life, Howie. This one paragraph changed my life.
Can I read it? Can I read it?
I can read it. I've got it. I can read it.
Have you got it? Cool.
Yeah. Here's what Rabbi Shais, it's pronounced Shais Taub, had to say about addiction. He said, people think addiction has to do with drugs and alcohol. It really has very little to do with drugs and alcohol. First of all, there are other addictions. People become addicted to behaviors, to other people, to relationships. It doesn't have to be a chemical. But secondly, and more importantly, what people don't get is that the drug the person is using to numb themselves is not the problem. It's the solution. I'll say it again. The drug is not the problem. It is the solution. So to addicts, the drug is the solution. Yes, it's a solution that destroys your life, but it's a solution nonetheless. Meaning to say the real issue of addiction, and this applied to me, is the underlying issue that the addict is attempting to address through the self-numbing behavior of the drug of choice. And what is the underlying condition? Very, very simple. A deep discomfort of one's own self. It's like being allergic to one's own self. Uncomfortable in your own skin, terminally unique, lonely in a crowded room, always wanting to feel a part of, instead feeling apart from. And that is the gnawing feeling that the drug or the alcohol or the high-risk behavior is being used to numb the person, to distract them. I am grateful for a second chance. And I always quote my favorite author, Ernest Hemingway, who said, "The world breaks everyone, but afterward, some are strong at the broken places." And I'm not proud of my past, but I am I'm pleased to have been given a second chance and to made a comeback. And I hope anybody who's viewing this will take to heart what Rabbi Shais Taub has to say. And there are people like that.
So Stan, talk to us a lot. You left 702 1997. It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
You made a bid for another radio station. Talk about your life post 702.
Okay. So it was actually, I left Prime Media Broadcasting 97. I stayed on the board till 98. Then I left. I bumped into someone at a function, and he said, "Are you Stan Katz?" I said, "Yes, I am." He told me who he was. He was with Tebby Investments. I said, "Oh, what are some of your assets?" He said, "We were media and telecommunications." So I said, "Tell me about the media." He said they had a stake in a station called Kaya FM. And they didn't have any telecommunications assets, but they had a stake in Kaya FM. I said, "That's interesting." He said, "Yeah, the minorities want to exit." There were 14 shareholders. Board meetings were like a war between loosely affiliated tribes. He said they want to exit, and I said there and then, I'll buy out the minorities. I then went to see Jeff Liebsman at Corp Capital, and they decided to back me. Now, Kaya FM was a disaster. It was technically insolvent. They didn't know what they were doing, and I pulled in a team who'd worked at Prime Media and weren't having fun anymore. And if it ain't fun, it ain't happening. I also say it's only work if you'd rather be doing something else. So I thought, because we were saving the station, it was a greenfield license, that getting the license transferred to the new shareholders would be a formality. In 3 months, we doubled the revenue, trebled the audience. And then I got the letter from the IBA, the Independent Broadcasting Authority. They had declined to transfer the license to the new shareholders. And I don't mind admitting I was suicidal. We were having such a good time and doing such a good job. I now had to pull out. And I brought these people on board. I'd sold them the dream. And they were all looking up at me and saying, "Now what?" I had a moral obligation. I said, "We will stay in the industry. We won't necessarily own the assets, but we can sell on behalf of license holders who don't have great sales teams." And I established United Stations, a sales house for radio stations who needed help with their sales. It's still going 20 years later, by all accounts doing very well, but we didn't get Kaya FM. The Prime Media also opposed our application. Naturally, they had to defend their turf. They were worried that I would compete with them, which I wouldn't have. I was at a totally different format in mind.
So now, Stan, subsequent to that, you've trained radio stations and hosts around the world. You've traveled through Africa. You've created a legacy for yourself in South African radio and in South African business, but you've now become a keynote speaker as well.
Yes.
And I think there's some life lessons that you need to give us. Part of it, you tell your story as part of your keynote speech, the story of the kid from Mafeking, the kid who goes through hardships. It's about rise, it's about fall, it's about redemption, and you mix it all in with a business story. So
yes.
Before I ask our audience to ask us some questions and comments, because I think so many people watching us this evening will have so many memories. I see Les is busy talking about be the 20th caller on this, and people are reminiscing about some of these amazing one-liners that you've come up with. But before we open it, and we're asking our audience now to please use the comment section on Zoom, on YouTube, on Facebook, and comment and ask questions to Stan. But Stan, give us some of the life lessons that you want to teach us as part of
I've
your
narrowed,
gift to us.
Well, I do a keynote speech now, which for which I have an agent that books me. I have.
Who's your agent?
Famous Faces. That's Stuart Lee, who'd actually worked with me in Prime Media, but since '88 he's been running Famous Faces. I also do a podcast, which will be dropping, as they say, in the next few weeks, called Herding Cats. I do a show on Mix FM called Herding Cats. And my keynote speech is, if you have one or two questions, I have one or two answers. It's life's lessons learned from a life in radio, but you don't have to be in radio to benefit from the lessons. I've narrowed it down to 10. Before I get into my 10 lessons, we all know the story, or should know the story, of Moses and the 10 Commandments. When Moses comes down from the top of Mount Sinai with the tablets and announces to the Israelites, all right, I got him down to 10, but adultery stays. Not everyone's going to appreciate that. Anyway, so my 10 lessons are: number one, obstacles are overcome when impossibility yields to necessity. Number two, the hardest thing living is the hardest thing you will ever have to do in life. Number three, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for taking care of. Number four, don't put energy into what should have been. Focus on what is and be grateful. Number five, be kind. We have no idea what kind of battle someone else is fighting. Besides, you never know who might be the instrument of your enlightenment. Number six, have faith. You don't have to see the whole of the staircase, just the first step. And number six, that's number six. Number seven, Churchill reminded us that when you're going through hell, keep going. Number eight, the absence of alternatives clears the mind marvelously. Number nine, excellence is not a skill, it's an attitude. And number 10, finally, is tough times don't last, tough people do. My wish to everyone viewing this is that you have the strength and the toughness to get through life, if necessary, one day at a time. And if you have one or two questions, I have one or two answers.
I'm sure there are many questions, but I want to ask the first question, and that is a question of regrets. Do you have any regrets?
Yes. My greatest regret is that I never had hair like the Beatles. Always wanted floppy hair. I'm joking. I have regrets. My main regrets are for the people that I hurt. I have tried over the years to make amends. I now have what I call a living amend. By keeping on the straight and narrow, I'm making amends anyway. But yeah, my regret is people I hurt along the way because I didn't have the strength of character to do better.
So Stan, someone's just commented to me, talk a little about John Burks. He passed away, was it last year, and one of the true great legends of South African radio. Tell us a little about the man that was Burks. And Frikkie. Who was Frikkie?
Frikkie was one of his characters. Burks was the most creative radio broadcaster that I had ever had the pleasure to work with. We became great friends. He started out as my boss, and then when I was running 702, I became his boss, but we stayed good friends. I miss him terribly. Burks was the most creative person. I would prep my show. I would do 4 or 5 hours of preparation for a 3-hour show. Burks would come in, he would breeze in and make it up as he went along. And he had all these characters. The thing at Burks, though, was, and also John had a heart of gold. And to people who know John, he was as tight as anything. He didn't like to spend money, and I do believe I understand why. He grew up dirt poor. So when he was making money, he was very careful how he spent it. If he took a rand out of his pocket or 10 rand out of his pocket, Van Riebeck would blink at the sun. But everyone knew that this was one of John's Mishigasim. But the most amazing man, kind-hearted, like you cannot believe. He'd helped so many people. He helped so many people get onto radio. Gareth Cliff was one of them. I was one of them. He gave me my first job on air. I could carry on about Bergs for an hour.
I see Malcolm Freed says, you haven't changed a bit, Stan. It's almost 30 years since we worked together. Great boss, always grateful.
Thank you, man. Malcolm was terrific. When I left, he actually sent me a really nice letter thanking me for all I had done. He was running. I appointed him as MD of Highveld Stereo. Did a wonderful job. He had his biggest problem, his biggest challenge, should I say, was curbing what's his name, Jeremy Mansfield's activities on air. But Malcolm, thank you. Nice to hear from you, Malcolm.
Wendy says, poor is a state of mind, not a circumstances. That's from Wendy Mechanic. But Stan, we also have a question. What do you think about radio in this current format today? 702 has obviously changed greatly. It's still a talk radio. Its demographic has changed. What do you, if you give us an honest assessment of how do you think they're doing?
I don't think radio is terribly creative right now. I don't think people are putting in that hour on prep for every hour on air. I think what you have now is a situation where if you're an influencer and you've got a million listeners, or a million followers, should I say, you'll get a job on radio. But it's a totally different skill set. So I'm not terribly impressed with radio. What's happening now is the big push is podcasting. And by the way, I have a podcast starting in the next couple of weeks called Herding Cats. So that's where the creativity is right now, I believe, is podcasting.
And in fact, it's no longer radio, it's audio. Is that correct? Is that
the correct term? Audio and radio. Because today you have to be platform agnostic. You have to be on all the platforms and different age groups. And you know this, how we actually discussed this when I first met you, was the audience for TikTok, the audience for YouTube, the audience for Facebook. You need to target your offering to whichever platform reaches your target audience.
So Stan, you approaching 70. You tell me you can't tell me
from which 70,
side.
But I'm not saying from which direction.
What is still in store for Stan Katz, the man, and Stan Katz, the manager?
Well, it's more Stan Katz, the podcaster, the keynote speaker. I will die with my boots on or die with my headphones on. I couldn't imagine, what would I do if I retired, Howie? I don't play golf. All the people of my age are dying off. So I still want to do what I'm doing. I still have passion for it. And I share leadership lessons that I learned the hard way through my addiction and alcoholism and through all the lessons I learned along the way. Izzy was very generous in sending me overseas to learn. I went to Wharton Business School to do a course. I went to Notre Dame Business School to do courses. I went to Gibbs, to Wits Business School. I learned a lot, which I like to share. And that's what I'm doing now, is sharing it with the next generation. I've also just acquired a mentee who is 25 and wants to get into radio, wants to get into commercial radio. So it's interesting being a mentor.
So Stan, before I ask you to tell us that you love us madly and say goodbye, I want you to pick one highlight of a remarkable career and a remarkable presence. And what's the one thing that stands out to you that you think encapsulates kind of the moment you're most proud of being Stan Katz?
I don't know if it was a moment or a series of moments, but it was when we, for strategic reasons, ditched our music format for talk radio. And as I say, it gave South Africans their first taste of democracy. What you had was white fears and black aspirations. And for the first time in hundreds of years, black and white South Africans were talking to each other. I'll never forget one night, a woman phoned up after listening to one of our talk shows and said she was going to burn her Beer uniform. And I thought, we have made a mark. We've made a dent. And so, yeah, introducing talk radio to South Africa, I think, is the highlight for me.
So, Stan, the first time we met, I told you a story that I'd met a young black man from Ekurhuleni whose first name was Katz. And I said to him, how on earth do you get a first name Katz? And he said, no, my father named me after Stan Katz. That legend continues. So,
Wow.
Stan, if I could ask you to sign us off tonight with a line that has made you immortal to South African radio.
Love you madly. Bye.
Bye, Stan Katz. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you all again. Apologies for the technical issues at the beginning of the show, but it's been an absolute pleasure to spend tonight with you and with the legend, Stan Katz. Good night, everyone.